We have to start over again. Occasionally, I am asked the following question that has to do with public speaking presentation skills. And the question goes like this. What is the biggest mistake that people make, that speakers make, when they are on stage in front of an audience and delivering their speech, or I call it their goodies? And for some years, I didn't have an answer, a specific answer to that question. And I struggle with it because when it came to me, it seemed like a multiple choice question. You know multiple choice questions, A, B, C, D. I choose D, all of the above. And this comes from my years of being involved with public speaking since 2007. First with Toastmasters, and pretty off and on, mostly with Toastmasters over those years, but also with reading a lot of books on public speaking and training. I did some very serious training with some top-notch speakers in Canada and the United States on several occasions, so I really grew my knowledge very quickly. So when that question came to me, what's the biggest mistake? I had all of these ideas I could answer with. Not just one, but 2, 3, 4. I couldn't just pick one. It was a real struggle. So I fought with that for a while, and finally, something clicked in my head. You have that sometime? A light comes on, and you come up with an idea, and you have the answer. Well, I came up with an answer to that question. It's not directly an answer. It's more like it goes around or underneath it, that question. And so I put it together, and now, when people ask me that question, what's the biggest mistake? This is my answer. The biggest mistake that people make is that they fail to give enough time and attention to learning about what public speaking is all about. And can you see why that's a satisfying answer for me? Because all the errors, all the things people could do to make their speaking better could be achieved if they learned more about it. So if you leave here with anything today, keep this in mind, that most people don't pay much attention to this particular communication skill. And as a Toastmaster, you have that opportunity to join the 1 or 2% of people who do devote some time to learning about this very influential, very powerful skill. So that begs the question, why? Why don't people pay any attention, much attention to this particular skill? I can think of one reason, maybe two. One reason might be they just don't know. They don't know about Toastmasters. They don't know much about speaking. A lot of people who speak are experts. They're professors, academics. They know a great deal about something, and they go up and speak about it. And I see this all the time at Nazarbayev University. I can also tell that they don't know much about public speaking. They talk about their expertise, and it comes across okay, but it could be so much better if they had some skills, some techniques of public speaking. So that's one issue. They just don't know. And the second has to do with a myth. This speech is kind of called The Myth and the Reality of Public Speaking. And I was caught up in this myth for many years too. Let's see if you maybe were too. I'm sure you've been to conferences and you maybe watched on YouTube some speakers who seem really, really good. They seem polished and they speak so clearly and they're so confident and they move around the room and they're stylish and they're dressed well and they speak perfectly, never missing a beat. And I thought, and many people do, that these people have something. They're born with something. It's in their genes to speak really well. And there might be that 0.5% of people out there who can do that. They're, what's it called, extroverts. They're very comfortable in front of people. And they're experts, and they really know their stuff. So you think, oh, they're born with it. Well, having been through public speaking now since 2007, all these years, all the training, and people that I've talked to, these professional speakers who I've talked to and learned from, I came to realize, no, that's not the case. Most people who speak well do so because they've learned how. They've taken the time and they've learned about the techniques and the strategies of public speaking. And the people that I've talked to, some of them were very shy, some of them had a bit of a stutter when they were growing up, some people never thought that they could do it. But they learned how, and they went on to become very successful speakers. So there's a myth.
I'm so sorry for this noise.
Okay, it's coffee time. So that was the myth I was caught up in. But I thought when people spoke really well, they just had it. But it took me some years to realize, no, that's not the case. I'm part of that example too. I wasn't much of a speaker in the past. But you can learn it. You can learn how. So that's the myth and the reality of public speaking. Now the question is, how do you learn how to become a good speaker? Toastmasters is the place to hang out, but what is it about public speaking in particular that we can learn about? You've heard of public speaking, you've heard it called the art of public speaking. But I add that missing link when I call it the art and the science of public speaking. As soon as something becomes a science, there's things there you can learn. Like in the sciences, think about biology and physics, chemistry, math. There are formulas and equations you can learn about that will teach you about physics and chemistry. And then you learn that discipline. Well, public speaking is in some ways very similar because it is a science in terms of all the techniques and strategies and skills that you can learn. There are dozens and dozens and dozens more of specific strategies to make you a better communicator and a more confident speaker. So when I talk about public speaking and science, you can be sure that you can learn a lot of what happens in public speaking. It doesn't matter what your background is, what pronunciation you have, whether English is your third language, or even what hairstyle you have. It doesn't matter. You can become a very good, a very capable communicator on stage because there's a science to it. There are many, many techniques about how to deliver your speech, how to write your speech, about, for example, eye contact, gesturing, moving around the room. There's a whole, oh, look who's there. A whole collection of techniques involved just on PowerPoint and visuals that can be learned. And there's putting your speech together, writing your speech, the sentence structures that you use. There's a whole lot we can learn about effective pausing, silent pausing between points. So that's a little sample of what's involved in public speaking. You'll learn a lot of that here at Toastmasters. So there's a great opportunity for you to learn this skill like you've learned other skill. Whether you're in the hotel industry, you've collected a whole range of skills there to communicate with people and to do your job. And whatever job you do, you've learned something there to become very capable in your job. Public speaking is no different. It's a science. It's there for you to learn. No matter how shy you are, or if you're introverted, you can conquer that by learning and by practicing. Learning about it and practicing. So that's another point I wanted to get across to you today. Most people don't spend much time learning about public speaking. Toastmasters is a place that you can go to learn about it. There's a myth about public speaking that you have to be born with it. Yet, you can learn it all and be a very effective speaker. And that's because it's a science. A science is there for you to learn. So like any speech that I give, I always want to leave something in terms of a practical tip or two, even if it's kind of theoretical a little bit today. In any speech that's delivered here at Toastmasters or anywhere, there should be something that the audience can learn from, that they can take away and kind of grab and take with them. Any kind of speech. And I'll do that today in the last part of my talk by giving you an example of the science of public speaking. Let me leave you with 2 tips or techniques that you can take away with today and start thinking about before your next speech. And it has to do with the introduction and the conclusion of your speech. And these particular parts are very important because an audience remembers most what they hear first and what they hear last. Yes. So we pay particular attention to the introduction and the conclusion of your talk. So let's talk about introductions for a moment. When someone speaks, how do they usually begin? What's the first thing they say?
Greetings.
Hello.
Yeah, greetings, hello, welcome to this talk. It's perfectly okay. It's very friendly, it's a nice gesture, it's like you're talking to someone personally. But it's the same thing everybody does.
Yeah.
Think about being different. Think about being creative. I have over 20 different specific techniques to begin your speech, other than good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, which again is fine, but it doesn't separate you from anyone. So what can we do instead of that greeting? You can begin with a simple yet very effective strategy, and that is asking a question. It's probably the next most popular after good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The next most popular would often be asking a question. And best to offer an open-ended question. That means a WH question word. What? Where? When was the last time? Asking a question immediately, it gets the audience involved with what's happening. Another thing you might try is some kind of a piece of information, often a statistic, can be very useful. I was reading in the paper, a bulletin came to my email, just news from the government that said 51.5% of people in Kazakhstan are female, 48.5% are male, which that's interesting, more choice for the men. Whereas in other countries, it's different. China, South Korea is the other way. So wouldn't that be interesting to start a speech with that kind of statistic and get involved? So there's 2 things you might try. You can do the introduction, you can say hello, maybe a moment or 2 after. But first begin with something different, a question or some piece of information or statistic. And in the conclusion, always think about leaving a final point for your audience. Usually you go into Q&A, question and answer, and it kind of peters out, and you say thank you for coming. But do think about leaving your audience with some kind of important piece of information right at the end. Because remember, they're going to leave here remembering what they heard, probably a little bit more last than what they heard first. So think about, as you finish your speech, and one final point I'd like to say today. Let me leave you with this. Something like that, to give your audience a little bit of a takeaway and a bit of a powerful point to finish your talk. So, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Toastmasters and future speakers and Toastmasters perhaps, I've covered some points today. Talked to you about what people don't do very much of, that is learn about public speaking. Talked about the myth and the reality of what's possible for you, because public speaking is a science and you can learn so much and become a very capable speaker by getting involved with Toastmasters, and you can do other things as well. What a great opportunity. And when it comes to specific tips, think about your introduction and conclusion. Be a little different. Do something different to start with a question or a piece of information or just statistic, and finish off with a strong point that your audience can take away. And again, I'll finish off with my strong point today. Remember what I said at the beginning, most people don't know that there's a lot to learn about public speaking, and they think that they can't do it. And often they're very scared to try too. But you can overcome all that, the fear and the lack of knowledge and the lack of skill, by simply getting involved with it and learning. Lots and lots to learn about public speaking. Something one of my trainers, Patricia, said to me. She says, public speaking is not rocket science, but there's a great deal more to it that meets the eyes and the ears of your audience. Think about that, and I hope you'll get involved. Madame Toastmaster.